Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay.
Okay, we are officially live. This is Group 2A and 2B for Ethical and Legal Challenges role play, and we will go ahead and start with Group 2A's role play.
I'm Marie. I'm the preceptor. I walk into the patient room finding that my student Savan has ambulated a patient against doctor's orders. We quickly and safely return the patient to bed, and I take Savan into the conference room to discuss this. Why did you ambulate that patient? There were clear orders in the chart not to do so.
She had to go to the bathroom, and I was just trying to be helpful.
Well, you've put the patient at risk for injury, and you failed to follow doctor's orders, and now we need to call the physician and notify her of the error. We'll also need to notify the nurse so that they can write an incident report if needed. We need to discuss these concerns because there's been a few more I've been hearing over the past few months.
I understand, and I'm so sorry. What have I done wrong?
Well, a month ago, it was reported to me that you went into an immunocompromised patient's room without the required personal protective equipment.
I was answering a call light and didn't realize the patient was on special precautions.
Did you see the sign that was clearly hung on the door? Did you familiarize yourself with your patient's plan of care at the start of shift?
I must not have, but as soon as the patient said something to me, I put on a mask, glove, and gown.
Well, the patient told me about it, and we should have discussed it that day. The patient should not have needed to be your reminder to put gloves and a gown and a mask on. There was one other issue that we needed to talk about that occurred a while back. Do you remember the day that you had the patient with the head injury?
Yes, I remember him. He was really nice.
Well, his family member is a nurse, and she came to me the other day to discuss the fact that you brought in his aspirin for him, but she had to stop you from giving it to him because of the concern for a brain bleed. Did you ever speak to the doctor to have the medication placed on hold or discontinued?
Nope, I just put down that the family refused the medication.
Well, I feel like we've missed out on a lot of teaching moments, and that's partially my fault. Actually, that probably is my fault.
Oh, I'm right here.
I know you are doing very well on your tests in class. However, it's imperative that the knowledge that you have is translated into hands-on care and safe skills within the clinic setting. Can you tell me more about what you think your strengths and weaknesses are?
I get very nervous in the clinical setting. I do have a difficult time understanding people some of the time because English isn't my first language. I know I need to pay closer attention to what I'm being told and ask more questions. I don't always pay attention to my environment, but I think I'm getting better at that. I realize now that I have put some patients at risk, but at the time, I didn't realize what I was doing was wrong.
Well, and I can't keep assuming that you know more than you do. I need you to feel comfortable asking questions and acknowledging that you have uncertainties. I need to make sure that you have a safe understanding of the skills and their applications. In the meantime, we'll need to address both of our shortcomings with the dean for the greater good of our patients. I don't want you to lose your scholarship or your student visa. We will call the dean and the doctor for the patient today and figure out what the next step is for you and for me. I feel that you may benefit from some more role-playing or simulation time in the lab. The safety of our patients, honoring protocols, and the school's reputation, as well as protecting the integrity of our profession, is of utmost importance.
Thank you very much.
So as you guys can tell, Group A, we focused on the greater good of our patients, and we used utilitarianism as our focus, as our framework. Do you guys have any questions?
So was there a reason why the student that we didn't talk to the student before, like when the first incidents happened? Was that part of your case study? I mean, is that?
Well, what was presented was that there were several other issues over the past few months, but it didn't mention if anything was ever addressed. And that's why I say I feel, based on our circumstances that we were provided, that it was really the preceptor's fault as well, because things should have never gotten this far out of hand.
And what would you do for future planning so that this type of thing doesn't happen again?
Well, I from my standpoint as a preceptor, we certainly would review the assignments on a day-to-day basis and kind of basically put them on a an action plan, I guess you could call it.
Hey, Marie, I can address this. In the utilitarianism perspective, you should always set aside personal intentions, feelings, or convictions. You should also consider the consequences of allowing an unsafe student to progress. You should always take action to prevent threats to patient safety. If the patient safety is threatened, then this compromises the integrity of our profession, so it should be addressed. Patient safety should always be considered the greatest good. Report incompetent or unsafe students to appropriate faculty meetings and be faculty members, and be prepared and have a plan to deal with emotional distress that some of this might cause to the preceptor, the student, and the faculty. Each state of Board of Nursing requires that nursing programs observe students closely for any behaviors that do not meet clinical safety elements, and those elements include safety, knowledge, and communication. So I'm not sure what that noise is. Whenever you do notice that there's something going on, you need to communicate with the faculty. You need to notify them immediately in the future if you observe students demonstrating any unsafe or unprofessional conduct. And of course, any information that you share with faculty is always held in confidence according to FERPA. So.
Good.
So you would have some kind of guideline to review, like the care plan at the beginning of the shift or something like that?
Correct. You have to go by the nursing standards that are provided by ANA as well as your state board of nursing. And always, in our case, we're using the utilitarianism framework.
I agree that you have to approach the patient with the issues immediately to resolve them. I really like how you guys decided what the plan would be as far as the patient needing more clinical work and maybe going into the sim lab. I think that was a good idea.
I think it was great that you actually asked the student what they felt like their weaknesses are. That's something that we utilize to try to figure out, really what's going on. And she was able to identify that she didn't feel comfortable in certain situations. And so that would be a perfect, like you said, a teachable moment to kind of get in there and remedy the situation, I think. So what are some of the other recommendations that you guys have for preventing this to happen, or other things on your framework that you guys talked about?
Well, one thing that we did talk about is per one of the articles that we read, where it stated that the preceptor needs to consider two important questions. And one of them being is, would we want this person, when they became a nurse, to take care of one of our loved ones, family or friends? And then the other question was, would we really want to work side by side with this person every day as a coworker, with the trust that you need to have in the medical field? And they stated that if you answered no to either question or both questions, then it's our ethical responsibility to be able to report the incident.
It really comes down to it. When you're a preceptor over a student, you have to decide whether you're going to stop this student from continuing practice that may be unsafe and ethically not the standards that we expect, or you pass that person on and allow them to continue practicing. And it can be a really difficult decision, I think, as a preceptor. One of the things I wanted met this case was it sounds like she was a foreigner, like she had a visa and she had some communication issues. Maybe she didn't understand the language barrier was there. And I wondered how you guys were going to address that with her.
Well, I think Anita, do you want to address this? Because I know in your up, I think it was perfect.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my take on that, after doing a little bit of research on it, is that there are several considerations in the clinical education of this student. We have a duty to provide individualized and culturally sensitive education to all students. English is an additional language for this student, and rather than simply asking if she understands, we have to make sure that she understands by having her repeat back our instructions in the same way that as a nurse taking a telephone order, you would need to read back. So that sort of trains on multi-level there. We can also ask if she has any questions about what is expected. You know, we may need to do some research into her cultural background. She may come from a background where it's considered disrespectful to question an instructor. You know, and hopefully by taking the time to learn more about her and developing an individual educational plan, we can help the student to be successful. We have to be sure to document all of our efforts. And if the student ultimately fails, the school needs to know that that the program and the preceptor have done everything possible to help the student be successful.
So how did you guys break up your case scenario? Did you guys kind of all address each thing, or how did you kind of break it up? Or
So Thomas and Marie wrote up a role play based on our scenario. Anita looked at the ethical and legal considerations that were at stake. Jennifer, she identified the decision-making framework or model that we were going to use. And I looked at the appropriate strategies for the instructor and preceptor to respond to the dilemma.
We also met on 3 separate occasions and we shared a Google Doc. So we were all working on the same collaborative idea thinking.
great.
Any other questions, guys?
I think you did a really good job.
Yes, great job.
Thank you.
Excellent work, guys.
Good job. Okay. So I guess we could go ahead and start with our dilemma for the 2B group. And we're just going to start right out with our role play, and then we're going to kind of pick it apart. Okay. So I'm the preceptor, and Claire, I need to speak with you in my office, and I'm going to close the door, and we're going to sit down with the student. Claire, can I ask you to tell me what you were discussing on your cell phone?
I was just talking to my mom. We know the patient, and that had the positive urine drug screen in the ER, and he is a family friend.
What did you actually tell your mom?
I told her that he had a positive drug screen, and I know that she's worried about him, and I am too, and I just can't believe it.
Do you understand that that was wrong to share this information? I overheard you, and we also have a no cell phone policy used when patients are being seen.
Yes, but I only did it just this one time because please don't be mad. I know I should have kept the information confidential, but I'm just really worried about him. I know my family is too.
So Claire, I have to let you know that you broke the confidentiality agreement that you signed to come and do clinical here. You also violated the HIPAA laws that you reviewed prior to starting clinical here. You also admit that you knew it was wrong to do so. And I now have to let the patient know that his information has been disclosed. I'll have to let your instructor know and the university know what has happened. And I can't let you continue clinical with me. I'm really sorry that this has happened, but I hope you understand that the serious nature of disclosing information to others not directly caring for them or those that have the right to know. It's a violation of the law, and patients really trust us, and we have to remain trustworthy as nurses, as providers. And I have to ask you to leave the clinic and turn your badge in.
So we talked about the ethical and legal considerations of what happened, and they were identified. What is at stake in this case include that the student violated HIPAA and confidentiality agreements that every student must sign prior to the clinical rotation. The clinic manager must report the disclosure to the patient. The university must be informed, and the student must be dismissed from the clinic. We would privately counsel the nurse practitioner student to think about the ethics of the situation. How would she feel if this was one of her family members and someone was disclosing personal information to the public without consent? We would review HIPAA regulations with the student and have her review and present the information back to us to verbalize understanding. We would discuss the categories of HIPAA information, such as not even the patient's name can be disclosed, that they were even at the clinic. Revealing information could be dangerous in a situation of domestic abuse. These actions best identify with the ANA Code of Ethics in Provision 1, the nurse practices with compassion and respect for the inherent dignity, worth, and unique attributes of every person. Number 1, respect for human dignity. A fundamental principle that underlies all nursing practice is respect for the inherent dignity, worth, unique attributes, and human rights of all individuals. The student did not meet these fundamental principles when she broke HIPAA laws and spoke on the phone about a patient. Number 2, relationship with patients. The nurse establishes relationships of trust and provides nursing services according to need, setting aside any bias or prejudice. Respect for the patient does not require that the nurse agree with or support all patient choices. Nurses are obligated to address behavior and to offer resources to modify the behavior or to eradicate the risk. The student did none of these and broke the trust of the patient. Number 3, the nature of health. Nurses respect the dignity and right of all human beings, regardless of the factors contributing to the person's health status. Respect is extended to all who require receiving nursing care in the promotion of health, prevention of illness and injury, restoration of health, alleviation of pain and suffering, and provision of supportive care. The nursing student had the opportunity to help the patient with respect and dignity and help restore health in this situation, but instead broke HIPAA laws to gossip about a patient's state of health. 2 ethical considerations that we found useful to this scenario are the theories of virtue ethics and utilitarian ethics, which we will describe. Utilitarianism ethics looks at the consequences of a particular act, how it affects the greater good for the greater number, the morally correct action that maximizes social beliefs, a normative ethical theory with right and wrong based on the outcomes of choosing an action. It goes beyond one's own interests to the interests of others.
Virtue ethics focuses on the moral character of the person. Virtue ethics is an important aspect of being a preceptor, as the preceptors not only exhibit these traits, they assess them in their students as well. Compassion is a virtue, and while the preceptor must have compassion for the student, they must also have compassion for the patient. In this case, the preceptor shows compassion for advocating for the patient following a breach in protected health information. Integrity is related to being trustworthy and consistent, and a good preceptor consistently gauges the actions of the student against those of the professional code and notifies both the student and the faculty when performance is not up to par. Justice is another, and with justice, it is essential that the preceptor practice due process. In due process, the preceptor acts in a timely fashion to address any performance issues or decisions made about the student's plan of study. So the ANA Code of Ethics references virtue in provision 6, which states, the nurse, through individual and collective effort, establishes, maintains, and improves the ethical environment of the work setting and conditions of employment that are conducive to safe, quality health care. Furthermore, under that provision 6.1, the Code of Ethics covers the environment and moral virtue. Virtues are universal, learned, and habituated attributes of moral character that predispose persons to meet their moral obligation. To do what is right, the nurse has the responsibility to report the student. It is her moral duty, and the student nurse has a moral duty to do the right thing for the patient.
Okay, so the decision-making model that we used was the ethical decision tool. We defined the dilemma, which was when the preceptor overhears the student discussing the patient's positive drug screen results with someone on her cell phone. She admits the patient is a family friend, and this is a clear HIPAA violation. So we clarify the personal and professional values, ethical principles, and the laws involved. And this is a clear violation of HIPAA laws, which have large financial consequences. And this is in the guidelines. Safety and personal violation of privacy for the patient. And this puts the preceptor in the hospital and university at risk. The ANA Code of Ethics, provision 3.1, the nurse promotes, advocates for, and protects the rights for health and safety of the patient. Protection of the rights of privacy and confidentiality of individuals and their families is a fundamental responsibility of the nurse. Trusting the nurse to protect privacy and an expectation that the patient should be guaranteed. Nurses have the duty of protecting patient information at work, home, on social media, and any other style of communication, either intentionally or unintentionally. Protecting patient safety is an essential aspect of the ANA Code of Ethics. For nurses to promote patient safety, they must identify any incompetence by the student. Additionally, by identifying incompetence, the nurse ensures the continued credibility of both the clinic and the educational program. In this scenario, addressing the situation, the lack of knowledge or blatant disregard of, and ultimately dismissing the student, the nurse is taking the utmost stance on the promotion of patient safety in an ethical manner.
The third aspect of the ethical decision tool by Torin and Wagner calls to identify alternatives for the action. Due to the intentional violation of the HIPAA law and the ANA Code of Ethics, the students should be terminated from the clinical site and also the university. Counseling, warning, or other alternatives is not available due to the intentional severity of the damage to the patient, fellow professionals, hospital, and also the university. Although as a preceptor, we have limited control on university practices, as preceptors, we could require that the university implement a HIPAA policy as part of the preceptor agreement. Some universities have no specific policy related to HIPAA violations. As an example, we were unable to find HIPAA violation procedures in the FNU catalog. University of St. Catherine's, for example, has a HIPAA policy that requires HIPAA training prior to clinical placement, as well as annual training. They have specific procedures in place if violations are committed, including notification of the school's HIPAA officer. Also interesting is that their policy included 4 levels of violation, ranging from mild, unintentional violations to severe violations, such as a mass release of personal health information. HIPAA violations for St. Catherine also include slightly different disciplinary responses for university staff versus university students. The fourth aspect of the ethical decision tool is to choose an action. This our action was as above, to dismiss the student from the clinic. This action is supported by the law and also with our utilitarian ethics theory as consequences of an action that is not the right thing to do for the greater good. The ANA Code of Ethics models this behavior in Provision 4. The nurse has authority, accountability, and responsibility for nurse practice to make decisions, take action consistent with the obligation to promote health and to promote optimal care. In Provision 4.1, authority, accountability, and responsibility. The nurse bears primary responsibility for the nursing care that their patients and clients receive and are accountable for their own practice. The nursing preceptor has an obligation to report and follow up with all nursing students' violations of HIPAA codes.
We really felt like the preceptor had to model the appropriate behavior, really address this as soon as possible, and inform the student of, not only the violation, but inform others of what had occurred. This fifth aspect of the ethical decision tool is to initiate discussion regarding unresolved issues, meaning what are the future actions or what are recommendations. And so we discussed that basically that perhaps a stronger review of HIPAA violations and HIPAA laws, as well as regulations and confidentiality is essential. I know that when I precept students, I do review HIPAA and confidentiality agreement the first day of clinical, because typically the student has to complete that information prior to being accepted at my clinic. And that could sometimes be months. It's been a year prior to that they completed those. And so on the first day of clinical, I remind them on that and discuss that and basically talk to them about the ANA Code of Ethics. And this behavior is exemplified in Provision 9 of the ANA Code of Ethics. So I'd like to review it.
The Provision 9, the profession of nursing, collectively through its professional organizations, must articulate nursing values, maintain the integrity of the profession, and integrate principles of social justice and health policy. The integrity of the profession, the values and ethics of the nursing profession should be affirmed in all professional and organizational relationships. Nursing should continually emphasize the values of respect, fairness, caring within the national and global nursing communities in order to promote health in all sectors. Together, nurses must bring about improvement of all facets of nursing, fostering and assisting in the education of professional nurses in development. The nursing students need guidance and support so that she may grow and move forward as a professional in the nursing community. We will generalize the solution to other similar cases and formulate guidelines and provide the ANA Code of Ethics at the start of the clinical in the future.
So this goes along with question 4 for our dilemma, was to identify appropriate strategies for the instructor or preceptor to respond to the dilemma. And basically, one of the things that we presented is that my students sign a confidentiality agreement with the clinic that I own, and then they must review and sign that they have gone through HIPAA training as well. It's done at their university. I have a PowerPoint slide at my clinic that they also are required to go through and sign and acknowledge that they have gone through basic HIPAA training. And that's done prior to the starting of clinicals. I also find out if they have a HIPAA requirement, which FNU does actually have a HIPAA. I've precepted students, they do have a HIPAA certificate that they do have to do. And so I do ask that they do that prior to clinical, which FNU requires them to do. But it doesn't have any provisions as to how, as a preceptor, I will handle a situation if there's a violation or of that specific law. So we really think that I had a student that actually had recognized the patient that I was getting ready to go and see. And I asked her, do you want to go and see another patient? Because she knew the patient. She knew him from high school, actually. And I asked her if she wanted to see another patient while I was seeing that patient. And I also, advised her that you can't disclose any of the information that you find out in this visit, or that he was even here. And if you're willing, if you understand that, then you can certainly, come in and see this patient. And she was absolutely mortified. She goes, well, of course not. I can't really reveal anything that I see in clinic today. And so I had a fair understanding that she was not going to relay that information. So I let her see the patient. The ANA Code of Ethics also models this behavior when it says the nurse owes the same duties to self as to others, including the responsibility to promote health and safety and preserve the wholeness of character and integrity, maintain competence, and continue personal and professional growth. Nurses have a personal and professional identities that are integrated and that embrace the values of our profession. We merge those with our personal values, and basically we owe it, this nurse owes it to herself to report the student and, model that behavior, as well as, we are the most trusted profession for like 20 years going, except for 9/11, we dropped to number 2. And we have to maintain that. That's something, our integrity needs to be maintained. And so we're going to talk about, Elaine's going to talk about some of the, basically how everyone contributed. We also had a working Google document. We met a couple of times prior to this and made changes in our document and kind of agreed on how we were going to pursue that. So Elaine. I wonder if she's lost, she maybe has lost connectivity. Okay, so basically everyone I think in our group agrees that we all contributed to this, and we came up with some guidelines and the ethical decisional tool that we use. And we'd really like to just open it up now and see for the other group if you guys have questions, or open it up for discussion. And we can share our references as well. I'll go ahead and try to screen share here.
The only question can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The only question I had was your scenario was actually for a nurse practitioner student in a clinical setting?
Right.
Wow. Okay. That would be tough. I mean, I can imagine after being in healthcare for 10 plus years, walking into a clinical site and picking up my cell phone and calling somebody about a patient.
Right.
That sounds like something a first semester nursing student might do.
Right. We discussed that too.
Yeah, you're very right.
So I'm sharing my screen. That was our references that we had.
And
So-
the article, go ahead.
Did you guys read out the scenario? Because I didn't hear the scenario for your role play. This actual scenario. Can you guys read it out to us?
We acted it out. We thought that we were supposed to do it in the role play and actually act it out. So it was a student that actually we overheard that you were precepting them, and you overheard them talking on their cell phone. And after you'd reviewed some positive urine drug screen results, they were off to the side kind of and talking on their cell phone, and you overheard them discussing that. And so that's when we immediately kind of picked up the scenario that we straight took them into the office and said, okay, we need to chat.
Okay. All right.
And we used the article Torin and Wagner, 2010. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Applying an ethical decision-making tool to a nurse management dilemma. And that worked really well for us to make an outline to use as a tool to apply to this nurse practitioner student.
And I heard you guys used the utilitarianism like we did. What was the other one that you said, the tool for the framework?
Virtue.
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 Mm-hmm. And how did you guys break up your assignment?
We
So-
all used the common document and put in, we kind of all worked on everything and put in quite a bit of information.
So did you
Yeah,
guys?
it was kind of like we were going to divide a whole bunch of things, and then we just started filling it in. And then when we got together, we talked about, you know, what we could add to, what we may not need. I mean, because some of the stuff was a bit long, but it was great. It was just you would think that we had worked together for a long time because it just worked really well, and that sometimes isn't the case.
Yes. And it was like we were in the same room. It was really nice.
Right.
Good.
So my question would be, did you guys, since she's an MP student, this is gonna affect her RN license as well.
Right.
Does she have a second chance? How can she get better? Will she be able to get into practice in the future? Do you guys look into that?
I mean, in all honesty, I mean, we basically made it. It said it was a student, but we actually made it into an NP student because that's what we're used to precepting. However, and a HIPAA violation is a pretty staunch violation, and so and it was a direct HIPAA violation to disclose that information, and so therefore we kind of didn't feel like we had any options to not go ahead and dismiss her from the clinic. And according to HIPAA laws, we do have to report that. So not sure exactly what that would entail, except for the fact that the university would probably be the one taking the further action.
Right. Yeah, we didn't specifically address what would happen because we just knew the only thing that as preceptors that we have control over is dismissing her from our clinic and reporting her appropriately. So what happens to her future education and her nursing license would be later on decided by both the university and the State Board of Nursing.
Exactly.
I also thought it was really interesting that you guys went through the FNU catalog and couldn't find a specific policy relating to should somebody actually violate HIPAA as a student of the university.
As a
Especially,
procedure.
especially considering how extensive that catalog is. Now,
It
maybe
It is.
perhaps the reason, because it's sort of a given, because you're a nurse practitioner student, that you obviously should know about
Right.
HIPAA. But like St. Catherine had a whole protocol, levels of violation, and sort of they did leave room for discretion on how the university would handle it depending upon the situation. But it didn't look extreme. Like in their violation levels, it didn't say this will be immediately reported to the board. It just said that, the university will take each case up kind of thing. And it depended upon the level of violation, which I thought was interesting. But, with how extensive that catalog is, I was pretty shocked. I mean, it took a long time to go through that catalog and to not see, because you would almost expect it to say you will be dismissed. You're likely to be dismissed because as a nurse practitioner student, obviously we know better by this point, about HIPAA. But
I really like how y'all use the FNU catalog. That's something I had not thought of. That's, genius, really. It could have applied to our scenario as well, I'm sure. I'm sure that they have foreign students as well. So, yeah, very cool.
Good job.
I think it also has like the syllabus, like the syllabi, if you're going into a clinical course, once they've gone through, DNP or FNP bound or any of those, it does have the requirement, obviously, and even for DNP bound, we had to complete the HIPAA, certificate. But that it was interesting that there was not specific, like our other university had some information. I work at a university and we do also have some things, and we have gross violation, if the student knew, if the student didn't know, that kind of thing. It's probably kind of more to try to find a root cause analysis. So if a student didn't know, and this would be undergraduate more specifically, but if a student really didn't understand or know the HIPAA policy before they went to clinical, then we kind of do a root cause analysis to find out why didn't they know.
Yeah.
Right.
And it has to be peer reviewed.
All right.
Right. Good job, everybody.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have
Great.
any more questions?
I just want to apologize. I kind of lost a lot of the conversation at the very end because of the connection where I'm at, so I wasn't able to finish participating. Sorry about that.
Oh,
That's okay. We got you covered.
I also apologize
I
for.
think it was very
I also like to apologize for logging in a little bit late and not playing my role earlier.
No worries. We all had each other's back.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for doing that.
Appreciate it.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast, and I will actually, I think I'm just going to go ahead and email the link to everyone just so that you guys have it. But it is,
Good idea.
just Sandra and I will submit. So
And I saw that as well. But if you look under the discussion, like where you ask questions, he advised that everybody do it.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
So go take a look, because I'm not crazy. Because I thought it was clear in the instructions that we weren't supposed to, but maybe perhaps there was an issue in the past, or maybe she's just suggesting that we do. I'm not sure, but
Yeah. I think it made it easier for them.
I'm
to
stopping
find
the
it.
broadcast now, guys.
Thank you.